Hello again. I am Oğuzhan Özcan from Istanbul Koç University Design Lab. This is Istanbul Studios. I have a special guest from Holland, Piet Hein Eek. Hello, Piet.
Hello. Hi.
He is one of the top 10 designer of Holland. So today we are going to talk with him. Our PhD student is going to ask them. I just give a little instruction. All of them are industrial designer. Hello, Uğur. Uğur working on social interaction, PhD student. Hello, Mert. Mert working for time-based design, something like that. It is very complicated, but I'm just summarized like that. Hakan, hello, Hakan. Hakan is working on smart materials. And hello, Ceylan. Ceylan is also working on children introduction. Now the time is we are bombarding Piet with our questions.
Okay.
Hi, Piet. Welcome. We are very thank you for being here. In one of your interviews that I watched, you said that most expensive product that you made is the vest table in scrap wood design. And from the material that you use, we can easily go unnoticed the price. And a person, customer, or a user, without knowing the process behind this design, mostly is not able to understand the labor itself. My question is, for you, does the material or labor put the value on a design, or something else puts this value? As a follow-up, how can we reflect or show the value of our designs without any words or any price tag?
The question is a nice question because the product is about this. So the concept to make products from leftovers, so not from raw material which you can use, but from production leftovers from ourselves. So normally you throw that away. And the moment that I realized that we throw away materials because it takes too much time to use them, even if they are still quite good to use. So for example, if you have small pieces of wood and you cut legs for a chair from it, it's possible. The chair itself even becomes more beautiful in this case, but it's more efficient to produce legs for a chair from big piles of wood. So we throw away small parts which are 100% usable, but become waste because of the labor which is involved. And of course, when labor is higher, you get more tension between labor and material costs. And because I love materials, I'm always very much focused on the quality of the material itself and use it as efficient as possible. I was annoyed about this idea. So the idea that you throw away material because you are too expensive and the material is actually usable was for me something to really think about and to, like I said, to get annoyed. And then I decided to sort of turn the world upside down and act as if labor costs nothing, with the phrase added to it that there are enough people in the world. And even it becomes worse and worse because people are spreading like rabbits instead of like well-thinking species. And materials, the other way around, are getting less and less. And this actually occurred to me in the year 2000. So I skipped the idea of people being expensive and materials being cheap, and turn it around and acted as if material is worth a fortune, which means, and labor costs nothing, which means you can add as much labor as you want because labor costs nothing. And the first product I made was a stool of leftover pieces. And after that, we made this table, and it was really expensive, even more expensive than the tables we sell now. And I thought I would never sell one table because it was like 20 times more expensive than our most expensive product at that moment, which was an oak table from normal material. And we presented it at a fair just to show the story. And before the fair actually opened, somebody came along and said, I want to have this table, which was a total surprise for us. So if you think about this, and after that, this whole collection became very, very successful. And if you think about it as an answer to your question, I think people do understand the tension between labor and costs of labor and what they can do and can buy. So everybody in this world is confronted by the demand of society to be as efficient as possible. That's also why we achieved so much. But in the end, everybody is also quarreling with himself about, I would like to do it better, but it's not possible because it costs too much money. And then all of a sudden you see a product which only takes time and is therefore very expensive, but it reflects the biggest scarceness of the world, which is that you're not allowed to put time in production or in your job. And I think because I turned it around because I was annoyed, in the end, I triggered something which people actually do feel and do experience when they see the products. And but it's totally coincidence. So I can tell this story afterwards. I would never have been able to tell it when I started with it.
Thank you very much.
Well, I can continue. Very similar with the stories behind the objects. I want to ask something. So in your presentation, especially in this virtual design festival, you especially mention about the storytelling aspect of the objects you make, like in the household context or in the making process. So intersecting with my research on this temporality and time, how do you think the stories of your objects are changing over time? Like some time passes, what do you think happens to these objects? And as a follow-up question, in the same frame, how would you compare your approach to these pieces that you make in contrast with, for example, 10 years ago? How do you think their value changed?
Yeah, that's again a difficult or interesting question. I think I mention often the fact that I have always a story which is the starting point of my designs. And I don't say this is a good or a bad way, but for me, the story is often more important than the aesthetical goal. So something comes out of a story. And I like that. I like the stories better than the results, actually. If I don't have a story, I don't like it. Even if it's beautiful, I think I need a story for myself to have like a frame in which is told. And it has been right from the beginning when I made my degree and even before when I was studying, I've always been focused on materials or sources and labor and techniques which are around me, like a farmer using his land and not buying a land on the other side of the country, but his neighbor is valuable because then he only needs to pass the border and it's more efficient. So for me, it always has been a focus to be as respectful and efficient with what's around me. And the focus was really very much on material in general throughout all those years. And then, material, the machines I have, and the employees who work for me, or the people I know what they can do nearby. So it's always something which is available. And almost every story you can link to this mindset. And just recently, I thought about the I've been often pushed in a corner of eco design, which is very close to this, but it's not a goal by itself. I think if everybody would behave in a decent way, eco wouldn't have been this issue. So if you consume what you need and where you get happy about, you don't need to think about the bad results of it. It's the way we consume and the way we produce, and that it's not really focused on respect for the environment in general. So for me, it's a much wider discussion. It's a holistic approach, and it's not like I use this piece of wood because it's good and I don't use that one because it's bad. You know, it has to do with your way of living. And just recently, because we redeveloped a property in France from bottom up, and there I bought a ruin of a watermill, and it took me 10 years to renovate it. But you also have 10 years to think about it, and it's a long story. But one of the things I slowly realized when I was renovating it is that the watermill was built at a time when there was not so much possible, and they took advantage of everything which was available there. The first thing, of course, is water, but also a smaller place to make a dike, and a small dike, but a big area to get more water. They used the wood from the forest. They used the stones from which I found out later, the stone yard, which was upriver. So they used the river to transport the stones. So slowly you start understanding why they built the mill over there and not 100 meters before or after. And then I realized that it's of all times that you consider your environment before you do something. And it's of this time that everything seems to be possible if you design, because the world will provide everything you want. And I found out at that moment that from nature, I think the other way around. I think you should always consider what's around you in order to be respectful for the world. And this is actually the biggest story in my life, and it reflects almost everything I've done the 30 years before. And so if you read everything I've written and said, it fits in this story.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I would like to ask my question because it's really in line with what you talked right now. I was looking through the products you have made, especially the ones you designed for IKEA. And what I see that you are telling people to embrace the imperfections of the material and make it as a part of the design. And in line with what you designed as the scrapwood table, we can see that it is actually really important to understand what we have around us and how we use them in the best way possible. So I wanted to ask, what do you feel about these big companies like IKEA starting to embrace the idea of actually using the material as itself with the imperfections and making it as a part of the design as well? So actually making it both more sustainable and more useful for everyone in terms of like production.
Yeah, IKEA was a very interesting project, of course, because it's totally in contrast what we do. The way we produce in our company is well, it's almost there's not a bigger contrast possible than between those two companies. But we found out also because I met Karen Gustafsson, and she was more or less the person who gave me the commission. So it was a personal connection. It's not about companies and big things and trying to achieve something. It was just because we liked each other and we found out that we had the same mindset and we could communicate very well. So that was a very important and basic thing. And then when we started, of course, by working with a company which is so different, you also start realizing or understanding this process. And one of the most important, there were two important things in this whole process. There was the first idea that we wanted to use an aesthetic for the designs which was totally different from the normal aesthetics in terms of perfection, which means that the people who make it have to abandon their rules and their way of thinking and have to adopt a different way of judging whether or not the product is okay. So normally you have a tolerance of a certain percentage if it's round, but if it's totally not round, you don't have this standard anymore. So it was very difficult to change. Sometimes it was easy to change the idea of aesthetics and standards for the production. So this took a lot of energy, but was really nice because it also gave different possibilities for IKEA. But the other thing which I realized during the process was that I made a chair, you know, the strange chair with the legs, which is totally knocked down and fits in a very small carton and is very strong. So I had big discussions with the company, said, well, it's not strong enough and we never make it like this. And I said, yeah, if you never make it, you don't know it. So in the end, they made a prototype and they sent it to us and we adjusted the prototype, sent it back. And then it was by far strong enough. So they didn't expect it to be the strength for business use, but it passed all tests easily. So because it's different, they think it's not possible, but that's of course not true. They use what's possible as a standard. And then the chair sold quite well in several countries. And the discussion started whether or not they should make a second batch of 50,000 or 100,000, I don't know how much. And they said, well, we won't do that. And I was really annoyed because I like to design a lot. And I said, why don't you make 2 batches or endless batches? You know, it's a design, we put a lot of effort in it, and now you stop. And they said, well, if we do so, we have to exchange something in our collection, and the whole storage system changes, and the infrastructure of transport we need to change. So I understood at that moment that it's not so easy to just make what you need and what you want for a company like this. And then I realized that my chair, which sells the best at that moment, now it's a little bit more, we sold 8,000 in 12 years or something. And they sold 50,000 in one batch. And if you take the effort we've done for this chair, it's much less than I did for that chair. So in the end, it's quite efficient what IKEA does in terms of quantities, and also because the transport is all in small boxes and knocked down. And the only problem you have in the end, of course, is that the quality should be good. And this chair is really good. So if people bought that chair, the impact for nature, for the environment, is very small in comparison to a lot of other products which are made in smaller quantities. But I never thought about this relation the way I did at that moment when I was, again, annoyed about the fact that I didn't want to make a second batch. But the biggest thing for me was that I realized that your own way of thinking doesn't work for a different way of producing. So you have to change your way of thinking for each different situation, which was nice to realize.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That was exactly the conflict point I wanted to hear from you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I get the last question. I think I need to shout a bit more. Okay, so overall the talk, we talked about how products had stories, and stories were pre or post made, while the product could evolve into something else. In design, as you know, we envision a way of usage, a way of persons interacting with the product itself. But when you put it in the real world, it's often not the case. People can use it in very unexpected ways, surprising ways. So when I look at your work, there is one that picks my attention, that in that open-ended nature is the listen tree. I think it was installed outdoors for a festival, if I'm not wrong, around 2010. So I would like to ask about the process of that open-ended playful design that waits for user input, and whether if you plan to do more of that work.
Yeah, this was a commission for an advertising bureau, but who also works for cultural institutes. And actually, this listening tree was made for the Confederation of Books. So there's in Holland, probably in Turkey, there's also a sort of organized organization which tries to improve the sales of books, but also the fact that people read. And they wanted to communicate the fact that books are nice and nice to listen to stories. And now, of course, you have podcasts, which are very popular. But at that moment, podcast was not really available, or not not in this volume. So they wanted to introduce the idea of listening to a story which is written by a writer, but not having to read, to make it more open for everybody, and on places where you wouldn't expect it. So on events, and so they came to me with this question, and of course the tree had to be knocked down again because it moves from event to event. And well, and I made some other trees at that moment for a comedian for another show, also a commission. So I was into making abstract trees, and I thought this would be fun. So in the end, it's an example of the fact that we do a lot of commissioned work for a lot of different people and organizations with very specific demands. And for me, this is one of the nicest things because it's challenging, but it also provides you with the opportunity to solve problems for other people. And of course, when it's more cultural, it's nicer to do, or when it's more emotional. Sometimes we have very nice commissions, but like the coffin for people I know who die, or even people I don't know. So sometimes these commissions are very personal. And then it becomes more important to make the best possible design. And then it's also very nice that we have the combination of production and design under one roof, which gives you the opportunity to really process your ideas the way you really want to. So in the commissions, I think it's most clear what the advantage is of producing your own products with the people you know and which you can trust. And for the tree, it's the same. We made it ourselves and developed it ourselves, and all the technique is done by ourselves. So it's fun in that sense.
Yeah, thank you so much. Before closing our coffee talk, I want to ask the very final questions. As you know, we had a very bad situation, extraordinary situation, pandemic, I mean. So during these times, some people made self-critics. So did you make a self-critics yourself? Did you thought, what do you want to change my life or my design view for the future? Is there any kind
No. I wrote a piece about this, the two pieces actually, about Corona and the way we respond to it and we behave. And I don't think it's that important in real. And I think the governments responded not so very clever and still are not so very clever. So I'm quite critical about the way we cope with it. For me, the major, in the meanwhile, because it changed a little bit, the major reason to be annoyed or perhaps critical is not alone that not every measurement is correct, which I understand. A lot of them I could say in advance that it won't work, or it's too much or not enough. But the most important thing for me, and perhaps you recognize that, is that the epidemic is also used by media and politics to make people scared, to scare people, and especially younger people. I have two daughters, two of them is a twin from 22 and one is 24, who are not, who shouldn't be scared for themselves, perhaps for their grandmother, for me not either, but they were really scared. And I am really annoyed about the fact that it's abused, the whole epidemic, to make measurements and legislation and even change the law to get more power to the government. And if I say it in Holland, it's probably elsewhere in the world much worse, because we have the most progressive government in the world. But I think it should be considered much more from a social point of view, and from that society should be cherished. And I think the government takes too much responsibility for themselves, and the people give it too much responsibility, and it's something which you should be as clever as possible. It's not like you can solve it. So, and now everybody seems to say we want to have 100% kill the virus, but that's impossible. So you should have like a policy that you say we accept it, and what's the best way to cope with it. And so I'm annoyed, and I don't think it's that important. I think in a few years we forget it, and nobody knows about it anymore. So that's my personal opinion. But we will have an epidemic which will be really bad in the future. That I'm sure about. For sure, that's something which I'm sure about. So.
I really like your positive view. Thank you so much, Piet. Today my host, one of the most important Dutch designer, Piet Hein Eek. Goodbye from Istanbul Koç University.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.